almost no one can ever actually name these people who apparently don't like them or believe. It's actually generally a vague, amorphous thing that exists above their head, but it doesn't have any specificity. That's where its power is. If it was your sister-in-law, Judy, you'd be like, it's just Judy. Or it's just my neighbor, whatever, Raquel. You see what I'm saying? It'd just be like, oh, it's just their perspective. That's just what they think. Yes, okay, fine, whatever. Here we are.
This is crazy. Okay. This is like otherworldly for me right now. I'm super stoked to be doing this. I was listening to your book. What is this God we're all
What's
talking
that book?
About? This book. What we talk about when we talk about God. Yeah, I was listening to that book and I was like, you know what? I should go see what he's really doing right now. And I saw that you have a weekend in Ojai. And so I signed up immediately. And then I was like, okay, I want to see if I can send him an email about this podcast that I'm doing, because public opinion right now of what I'm doing is not great. The way that people see what I'm doing, it's just...
What's that number?
A lot. I have no idea. Oh my God, you're totally going to do it to me.
Okay, so it's actually a hairball of anxiety, but you don't actually know. Yeah, so that's different than public opinion.
Yeah.
That's just a couple people.
That's so great.
By the way.
Man, okay, rad. Before I even go into the podcast interview, I've watched maybe every single thing you've done. I've watched Numa. I've watched The Heretic on Amazon. I've read your stuff multiple times over. So I am deeply humbled that you even said yes.
Here we are.
I've been reading my email, to be honest. So thank you so much. Here we are. Okay. I wrote a really long introduction for you, so you're going to have to sit and bear with it for a second and correct me if it's wrong.
Do you want me to put my hand up? How does this work?
I don't know. A lot of my audience, every time that I told them that I was interviewing you on the podcast and how excited I was about it, they were like, who's he? And I'm like, oh my gosh, in my world, he's like the biggest. And for them to get an idea of who you are to me, I figured I'd really put some text to phone time and get something going for you. Here it is. Today's guest is someone whose work has profoundly shaped not just my personal journey, but the very foundation of how I approach our conversations about love, relationships, and human complexity. Rob Bell is a New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and former pastor who has become one of the most influential voices in modern spirituality and culture. For those unfamiliar with Rob's work, he burst onto the scene in the early 2000s as the founder of Mars Hill Bible Church, which grew to become one of the fastest growing churches in America. But it was his willingness to ask difficult questions and challenge conventional wisdom that truly set him apart. Through his groundbreaking books like Love Wins, What is the Bible, and Everything is Spiritual, Rob has consistently pushed us to expand our understanding of love, faith, and human connection. His Numa video series revolutionized how we talk about spirituality in the modern age, and his podcast, the RobCast, continues to explore the depths of human experience with grace, humor, and profound insight. Rob has been featured in Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world, and his speaking tours have filled theaters and venues across the globe. Beyond these impressive accolades, I want to share why Rob's presence here today means so much to me personally. When I was navigating my own complex journey, Rob's message about love being bigger than our conventional boundaries became a lifeline. His teachings about grace and how love wins in the end helped me understand that my calling to support those in the midst of infidelity wasn't just valid, it was vital. His willingness to tackle stigmatized topics with compassion rather than judgment showed me a path forward in my own work. When Rob talks about love being more spacious than we imagine, about the importance of asking better questions rather than clinging to easy answers, he's speaking directly to the heart of what we do in this community. Today, we're going to explore themes of unconditional love, the complexity of human relationships, and finding grace in life's messiest moments. This conversation is a dream come true for me, and I know his insights will resonate deeply with many of you who are wrestling with questions about love, faith, and personal growth. Please join me in welcoming Rob Bell to the Other Woman in the Wife podcast.
Yeah, whoever that guy is.
How was that?
That'll be interesting for you to talk to that guy.
He's great. Okay.
I just don't care.
If you were to do your own intro, what would it be?
Like making sure everybody knows whatever they need to know. It just isn't like I'm just bored already. You know what I mean? It's just one more thing to cling and grasp to.
Yes, I do know.
That just isn't. We already tried that. All that like posturing and all that. Do you know who I like? All that. That was years ago. You know what I mean?
Oh man, that's so great.
Identity and events are two different things. There are the events of a person's life, but to somehow cling and grasp to them as some sort of identity is just setting yourself up for heartbreak. It's stuff that happened and it shapes us and we learn from it and then we keep going and evolving and growing. But to pick think about the things that you mentioned in that intro, the Numas, I made those from 2001 to 2009. That was like 19 Robs ago. I was like a boy. That was like my 30s. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's great. I embrace all the earlier Robs, but we're doing other things now. So if at any point I was like, this is me, then the tomorrow me or the tomorrow Chelsea is already laughing at the earlier one. It was.
Yeah. What is the thing that you're doing right now that you're most excited about?
Where I get to go to these theaters and I've written these plays and I get to watch these actors and directors and lighting people and costume people put on the plays. So I'll do that. I'll go to Iowa and I'll go to Pennsylvania and I'll go to Scotland and see my plays. And then these novels, Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? It feels to me like all the writing I did was just warming me up, was just a warm up for these novels. These are the first thing I've written that I'm like, perfect. I like really do something to me. So a lot of what I'm doing now everything else felt like a warm up. Like it was great. I loved all of it, and I'm painting a lot. Yeah. So this morning I was here in the studio space painting and sitting with people. Like I'm not interested. I used to go around with a microphone and talk to crowds. And now I sit under these trees in Ojai and people come and bring their question and I ask them about their questions. That's people are way more interesting to me now. Hearing who they are and what their questions are and watching them find clarity is much more interesting than standing on a stage. I already know what I'm going to say pretty much. So that's not interesting as much to me anymore. Yeah, that's why I just find it so fascinating how you can do a thing, maybe even according to your intro, apparently, be known for a thing and then be like, that was a great chapter. Now I'm doing something else.
Yeah. Talk to me about closing chapters. Is it easy for you to close chapters?
As I began to see, that's actually the pattern, is I follow the curiosity. So some people, and this is wonderful, they do something and they do it every day and they're very good at it and we need them to do that. And they find new subtleties and nuances to it and that they get a regular paycheck and they make the world go round. Wonderful. It's a very satisfying, meaningful life. And I happen to marry somebody who's 10 steps ahead of me, have been following something, and you just follow it where it's taking you. And then that chapter comes to an end, and there's generally an in-between where you're like, on all the wobbles and nerves of, I wonder what's next. And then something begins to like tug on the sleeve or to make itself known. And then you follow it, and you live in a smaller house you share a car because there isn't a lot of money. And then you do something, and then there is money, and then there isn't money. And then there's more square footage and less square footage. And it's all like a work of art at some level. Do you know what I mean? So that's.
Oh, totally. I love hearing you talk about that, especially for people who are.
Yeah. And there's a good grief. Sometimes there's a good grief, which change is a form of loss, and loss is a form of change. That was like when you look at pictures of your kids when they were younger and like that ache in your heart. Oh my God, they were so cute. And you're like, they were so cute. And if they would have stayed 4, that would be weird. but now they're 7 or 9 or 14 and they aren't who they were. And yet that's how the whole thing works. So there's like this grief of, oh, look at how it was. And yet if they kept repeating 3rd grade, that would be a little awkward. It's like a grief, but it's good. And you just let it pass through. You just give it the space that it wants.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Our
daughter is 15.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
And she came to destroy the patriarchy, beginning with me. She's like my master teacher. She's just an awesome force of nature, human being, DJ in the front seat of the car whenever we go anywhere. She has the best taste in music. And she's like a master teacher for me.
Tell me about some of her favorite music that has impacted you.
I don't know if the music, she's just come to call out everything ridiculous. Like she doesn't have any hope. Obviously she's raised in our home. So she has nothing on her shoulder about what a woman can't or can't do. Mm-hmm. She has absolutely no, if it's insane, that's insane. She has no loyalty to the previous regime. She's very tuned into when somebody is trying to hijack her own deep knowing, which is the whole essence of lots of patriarchal systems was, Chelsea, you don't know. We know. We'll interpret it for you. We'll tell you. So it overrides your own Chelsea deep knowing. And my daughter just sees all of that and it's awesome. She's just, so Charlie XCX, a lot of Charlie XCX, a lot of Boy Genius, a lot of Phoebe Bridgers, a lot of Olivia Rodrigo, a lot of Clairo, a lot of Bob Dylan. She'll discover stuff. So there's been a fair bit of, a lot since the movie, especially a lot of Bob Dylan. I'll hear Smiths, I'll hear The Cure. So she'll go anywhere from like 80s, Fleetwood Mac, 70s, all the way up to the Charlie XCX deluxe album with that unbelievable song with the 1975. So she's like the full spectrum. You never know what's coming next.
I love it. That's so great. And I love that you just spoke to the fact that children can be our greatest teachers. And for a lot of people in our audience, one of the things that they're struggling with is that their personal decisions and their personal love life, their marriage, their affair, whatever, are bogged down by the idea that they will destroy their children if they make a different decision than the one that they're making today. What would you say to that person?
I would say begin with something like, let's pick something. Think about an architecture theory. How, if you place 2 columns near each other, what that does is create a space between the columns, which is an actual space, but it's a negative space. So if you put up some walls, or if there's in your backyard, if there's a tree and there's a patio, what those objects do is they create a space that you then inhabit. So we're constantly creating these spaces that are created by these objects like columns, walls, trees. So if you're like a parent, your presence is creating a certain kind of space, and your kids are inhabiting that space. So like a home. So if you have all of this unresolved anxiety, tension, anger that hasn't been given expression, and you're not doing your work, and there's a simmering, boiling resentment, or you hate your job and you come home every day and have to detox because every day you spend 9 hours in a very destructive environment, emotionally, physically, spiritually, your kids are they will pick that up. Or if you and your partner aren't doing the work to work through your stuff, your kids are in that space. So I would just begin with what's going on inside of you and pay attention to that. Like, there are lots and lots of like really good guides who can help us do our work, do the self-inquiry, do the like healing, flush out what needs to be flushed out, follow the questions, and that will profoundly affect your kids.
I'll never forget, just because you touched on the topic of work, I think that a lot of people, especially people in my audience, have work confused with being a really good student. And when I say really good student, they go and they buy all the books. They go and they buy all the books. They listen to all the podcasts. They receive in a lot more input into their heads. And I'll never forget this one girl. I'm really focused on doing the work. And I was like, what is the work in your opinion? And she was like, I'm going to make my way through Mel Robbins's Let Them book. And then I'm going to make my way through this other book. And to me, there's like a difference between taking in somebody else's work. What are your thoughts on that?
Because that's lovely in a much needed stage. Like even it's a radical idea. Oh my God. There are people who have wisdom to share. For many people, that can be revolutionary as like, oh, wait, there's very little that I'm going through that other people haven't gone through and probably have some interesting things to say about it. So almost you could see it like developmentally, that's a super important awareness or stage. And it's not that you aren't always tuned into the wisdom that's out there, but to somebody who's like, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, I would just say, how about we sit in silence for a moment? There's different ways to word it, but one, what's your most pressing question right now? And if we were to sit with the person and they were to, okay, so that's the question. What are the events that have led you to that question? What is the feeling that it produces? Let's follow that feeling. What's the fear? That's the one question that often can get us right to the thing. What's the fear? That I won't make a good choice. Okay, who knows what choice you're going to make? Who knows what the implications? Everything is risky. What's the choice that makes the best story? What's the choice that calms the body, that grounds you in your sense of self? Like those are the kind of questions you can ask. And quite quickly, that person will probably get all sorts of clarity. That's what I've noticed over and over again.
So work results in clarity, not confusion.
We all own our lives. We actually get to make choices. So whatever wisdom, whatever knowledge we do pick up around us or from a class or a course, we still get to decide what the next step will be. That's the whole thing. So the relief of, well, somebody else will decide for me, that's called a cult. So you think about
that's so good.
Fundamental premise, and cults come in all shapes and sizes. There are business, there are family, there are relation, there's all kinds of cults. But the fundamental premise of a cult is somebody has something you don't. So if you give money, attend, study, have sex with, whatever, then they will dispense whatever that magic is to you. So that person, the only way the cult survives is it has to protect that. And so preservation is one of its most driving energies. The only friend who can actually help us or guide, the only guru who can actually help you is the guru who comes to remind you that you don't need a guru. But sometimes you need a guru to remind you. Sometimes you need a teacher. So that person, so like even facing a decision, when you've in the past have similar decisions and you followed it, what did it lead to? Oh, it wrecked me every time. Okay. Yeah. Notice how when you choose that in the path, it generally leaves you a wreck. Okay. Noted. And it has to have a certain lightness to it as well. Otherwise, everything gets way too heavy.
If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer.
That whole topic of trusting yourself or trusting someone else with your personal decisions, I'll never forget when I was young, my sister was having a really challenging time in life. And so she defaulted all of her decisions to our father. And when she did that, she basically made it part of her own programming to go and ask dad every time she was faced with a decision and not challenge his understanding. And I remember going to her and being like, don't you see that's him living your life for you? Instead of it being an opportunity for you to make a decision of your own informing. And it wasn't until I had the epiphany, like where the lights just went off, where I had asked somebody for their opinion on a decision I was about to make, and I didn't agree with their opinion. And I was like, why am I asking them? And going into that state of silence that you're mentioning, where it's okay, if I want to lead myself in my own life and I want to live my own life, then I do need to take in who are the people that I'm asking for input, and do I really want to duplicate their existence? There's this one line that my own coach, he's a spiritual coach of mine, he says, we are all born as voices and so many of us die as
That's pretty good.
And that really resonated for me as far as who you're introducing into the decision-making process of your life. And what is it that
by the way, have you ever heard of a clearing committee?
To that place?
I think it's a Quaker tradition. I went to one time.
No.
A guy that I knew was thinking about running for public office. He's going to do a campaign and all that. Another friend said, let's do a clearing committee, which is this practice of we all came and sat in silence with the friend. And then the friend gave like a 1 minute, I'm trying to decide. And then we all sat with them, and you asked them, there were no leading questions. You could not ask a question that you had an opinion about. So everybody's opinion or advice is surrendered at the door. Here's what you should do, to which my kids would say, okay, boomer, because we come the generation before us were like masters of, my advice is just co-opt, just hijack the person's. And then we sat until a question came to us to ask this person about this decision that was in service of their decision-making. So everybody's already surrendered. You're there to be present. And what's so fascinating is the love and trust in the room, that human beings are fully capable of finding clarity. So everybody shows up as an act of love for them to simply walk with them and help them tune into their own deep knowing, which obviously is parenting 101. I am here to help my kids learn how to listen to their own knowing. Like, how do you feel today? Can you go to school or not? Yeah, I'm too sick. Okay. like that's becoming an adult, is being aware of what's happening in you and around you. Yeah. That's the actual friend is, do you want my advice? Actually, I'd ask if I wanted it. But yes, I would love for you to enter into this with me and discuss it. And here's what I'm thinking. And an actual friend helps you learn to your own helps you listen to your own deep knowing. So any sort of should, any sort of supposed, any sort of external authority just jams up your antenna instantly.
Yeah, I heard this one line and it said, should is could with shame attached to it. Like, as if there's the possibility ends with an actual direct path that is not what you're choosing. And I think it's really interesting to ponder that whole idea that somebody else has an idea of what your next step should be. And I remember, early on in this venture of mine, when people were like, I need to talk to you. And I was like, you don't need to talk to me. You just need to sit with yourself for a second. And really trying to figure out how to respond to my own call to support these people, and not get wrapped up in the idea that
you hold up
I
mirrors.
know better than them, because I don't.
Yeah. And we need each other to hold up mirrors. We need each other just to hold up. Right. I hear you saying this, because that sounds like misery. You're right. It is. Yeah, we need each other. It's not that we don't need each other. We don't need the wisdom
Mhm.
of others. It's just the subtle, nuanced, what exactly is happening here.
Yeah. And you know what? That kind of evokes the thought for me about the fear of being needy and the fact that we are born into this world as needy individuals.
Yeah.
Like we need water, we need food. And so having this fear of, oh, it's me, I'm too needy. That's why I can't vocalize my needs or my wants or my concerns or what's actually going on in my inner reality, because then it's going to put too much pressure on those people around me. And I thought that was such an interesting fear to live.
And it's like, I have friends who I'll call and be like, okay, you got a minute? I got to throw some stuff against the wall. And then I'll just take, and Kristen and I do this all the time with each other, obviously, is I'll just take something that I'm sitting with and I'll just take all the bits and pieces of it and I'll just get it out. And I have specific friends who I'll call on specific things. Okay, I got one. Okay, here's the thing. And they'll go, da-da, and they'll start asking questions about that. It's almost like we're both looking at what I just threw against the wall. Yeah, that's part of the fun of it. Is, I don't know,
Yeah.
or I'll have something that moves me, something in my work that it brings such a sense of joy or satisfaction. And I will call a friend and just talk about it. And they'll be like, it probably has something to do with, you're right. It does. And they're like, isn't that, it's almost like that's closing a loop on a thing from what you're, yeah, they'll just connect some dots. They'll like,
the connectedness.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, it really is. I completely agree. One of the things that I want to talk to you about is that, and it's funny that you brought up the Numa ones where you were like, those were so many versions of Rob ago. I went and I looked at the oldest one that I could find on your thoughts on love. And it was about Dode and Ahava. And what was the other one? There were 3 components to like the Jewish understanding of love. And it was friendship, physical affection, and something else. Anyways, in that video, you had stated, and this isn't to discount your work or anything, because you know I love your work, but you were like, that's why love inside of an affair cannot exist. And one of the things that yeah, but it was a long time ago. Don't even worry about it. And it was when you were baby Rob. And you were conditioned by your own external sources. So I completely get it. But when I first came to market with this concept, I thought about how immediately the world around us invalidates the love that is found by way of an affair. And when I started to read people's personal accounts, because then I was like, the only way to know the truth is to have a firsthand account. So could I collect some firsthand accounts of what the experience of an affair really is? Because I don't think it's about betrayal. And it can involve betrayal, that's for sure. But when I started to read these people's stories and get acquainted with what was actually going on, I had this thought where I was like, love meets you where you are. And love isn't necessarily a thing between 2 people, but I do think that it's an inertia that exists and is ever present. And it's our ability to harness it that really makes it a powerful thing at play collectively. And then I had a thought where I was like, why couldn't love be real inside of an affair? And I tried to figure that out. And I couldn't really get to the bottom of it, but I basically was left with this question of, why do we have to define whether it's real or not, especially when we're just spectators? And then I started to think about your thoughts on love being something that doesn't fit inside of boxes. And so I wrote down a few questions about love's expansiveness based on the thoughts that you've shared with the world. So I have this one. You've spoken a lot about love being more spacious than we imagine. For our listeners who feel trapped by society's narrow definitions of love and relationships, could you explore what you mean by love being bigger than our boxes?
Lots of people, their fundamental perception of love is it's a thing that you either have or you don't, that you either lose or you possess. When I would just begin with love as the nature of reality itself. The universe has been expanding for 13.8 billion years. So what is it that moves beyond itself in greater and greater depth, beauty, and complexity, which also contains a whole world of chaos and disorder that keeps transcending itself for billions and billions of years. So I would begin with love as like an engine of the universe itself, something we're in, something that is the ground of our being, the source of life itself. Of course, we would feel it, experience it, know it, have it open us up, have it break us. So then human beings come along with these, almost like a graffiti artist has those stencils, and we place these templates over top of certain things and go, that's love. Yeah, great. Yeah, sure. You like have a drop in your palm of your hand and you're pointing to it, but you're like standing in the ocean. So I would just begin there, that as opposed to this thing, same with peace, your true nature is peace. Like as a human, like if you're still and you like calm the nervous system down and you breathe deeply and you do this enough and you practice this, what you begin to discover is that your true nature is peace. And pretty much most of the suffering comes from what we attach to. I mean, there's obviously real legitimate suffering in the world, but so as opposed to peace is something you're trying to get, I would just begin with it's something you are. So when people, like, even think about the person who rushes into a burning building and rescues someone and bring them out, and they're interviewed by the TV news person, and they're like, what made you so courageous? The person never goes, I've always been courageous. They're almost mystified,
they're really proud and arrogant,
that it was courageous or brave. People who are courageous or brave, your most generous friend would never say they're generous.
Yeah.
Or your friend who lives with a deep, contagious joy probably doesn't talk about joy as a thing they're trying to get, because it's just embodied. They just are. So if you're looking for your purpose, whatever you do, stop. You won't find it by looking for a purpose as if it's some external thing outside of you. You'll pay attention to your life, and love is the ground of your being. You will get clarity and steps you can actually do. And of course, that will be good for all of us. You being the full Chelsea is a gift to all of us. And maybe later we'll be like, oh, that was your purpose. But it'll just, that even that will feel weird. I don't know what my purpose is. I just know certain things are like stepping into life itself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Stepping into life itself. Yes, it absolutely is about stepping into life itself. And feeling, I think it is also about this feeling of like, you've been with yourself every single day before this one, and you will continue to be with yourself for every day beyond this one. Like the one person that you have with you all the time.
You haven't actually been alone.
No, you haven't. Even though it feels, I feel like the confusion between isolation and loneliness, there's a real need for connectedness, I think, in society at large. Like the fact that I've spoken to people all across the world about this topic, just because there's nobody else for them to speak to on this topic, it really does illuminate, I think, the existences across the world, and that your existence isn't necessarily everybody else's in that very moment, but there's purpose in those isolating moments for you to recognize them when somebody else is coming across them. At least that's what I felt when this idea came to me, or I acted on the idea. I was like, I couldn't imagine someone being alone in the same way that I was alone back then. And so just opening up the conversation felt the thing that was meant to be done at this time, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk to you about love and grace. Especially, I have to tell you, Rob, a lot of the people that come into my world are the people who have the ability to forgive everybody but themselves. And so I deal with a lot of people who are in the throes of a lot of self-hatred, a lot of asserting that they are the center of everybody else's problems, and that they are the cause of everybody else's hurt. And that's a really hard thing for them to grapple with. And it's certainly difficult to watch someone do that to themselves over and over again. So in Love Wins, you challenge traditional interpretations of love and grace. How might this broader understanding of love help someone who's struggling with shame or feeling unworthy of love due to their relationship?
Well, how else would it work? Like, how would Chelsea ever learn how to be Chelsea if Chelsea wasn't free to be Chelsea? If you were to set up a world, an actual world with like food and surfing and music and sex and travel and a sunset and heartbreak and every great heartbreak song and the feeling of running into your friend when you're out at the grocery store and you have the best conversation in aisle 5, like all the stuff that makes life. How else would this human experience work? How would you know how to handle money if at some point you didn't get money and you like, I shouldn't have bought those trousers. I should have bought that car, not that car. Like, how else would I learn how to be a dad? Then we made some people and, oh, apparently when we say that, or apparently when I do that doesn't help. When I do this, it does help. Like what the person who asked the question, it's a absolutely 100% human, understandable question. But how else would you learn how to be you? Like, then doing things, then trying things. Like, how else would we learn how to love without actual relationships where we take action? And so oftentimes the person is beating them up because they're themselves up because they're saying, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? But wait, anytime across the board, someone says, what was I thinking? As a shame question. Here, a bare minimum of self-inquiry. And we can actually answer that question 100% of the time. You were thinking you were lonely. You were thinking there was a good paycheck involved. You were thinking, I'm scared. You were thinking, this is better than that. You like, and 100% of the time, we will be able to answer what you were thinking. And the answer will be fear, longing, safety, security, the most unoriginal human needs that we have had for millions, whatever years. Welcome to being human. So what's fascinating when you said the question about, I've hurt so many people, that actually in a weird way doesn't present itself as a swollen ego. But my God, that person is very confident that they're able to cause lots of people a great amount of misery. So it presents itself like a diminished sense of self, like I'm a worthless piece of whatever. But hiding in the very question is a giant ego of I make decisions and the ripple effects go in every, calm down, just pump the brakes. You did some stuff. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like it's a sleight of hand that presents itself like I'm just a worthless, but I can make decisions that wreck lots of people. Show me a kid who the parent goes to them and says, hey, that whole thing that happened, I was like so out of whack. I was in such pain. I was so confused. I was honestly just looking for someone to see me. And that person, what kid, when their parent comes to them in humility and says, I can see now what was happening within me, and I realize that decision affected you, and I'm so sorry for the negative ways. Now, that parent might be full of shit, and they might keep making, but a parent who's growing and learning, isn't that kind of the gift you give your kid? Like, I'm just figuring this out like you, and some basic integrity and character. And even with the kid, and now if the kid's 7, you probably don't, but as the kid gets older, hey, if you ever see that thing, me doing that, or if you ever see me, that's when I get vulnerable and make really poor choices. Just call me out. That's all you need. Just let's have a code word. Yeah. There's nothing with my kids that I haven't ever been like, hey, sorry about that. I realize now that I was bad, that my kids aren't like, yeah, we get it. Or my kids have this great line. They'll be like, we know where you come from. They have this really fascinating, we know how the world that you came from, what the world was even like, and the world that you came from. And we actually find it quite amazing that you've just, you and my kids have been very straightforward, that you and mom, you just kept going, you kept evolving, you kept following the joy, you kept getting looser and like more limber and flexible as you got older, and you like got more curious. Pardon?
Less dogmatic.
Yeah, kids are very
Dogmatic.
intelligent. I always say the software comes in upgraded. Like the emotional intelligence.
Oh, I love that.
Think about right now. Think about how your average 14-year-old knows the Israel-Gaza narrative is completely propaganda on behalf of the American government. They just know, no, that is not like good guys, bad guys. Don't feed me that. Their intelligence about what a narcissist looks like when a narcissist gets elected to public office, and what loyalty oaths and what silencing the press, they're like not fuzzy on this. They've grown up with therapeutic understandings, however limited or flawed, that you and I like found our way into. Even like you and I, even like a therapist or like an interior life or like the actions that I take, I could actually sort through why I do some of this stuff. There's actually people who could help me. That was like a radical idea when I was a teenager. And now it's, oh, my therapist. It's almost like a meme. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would go back to that question.
Yes.
Else would you learn to be you? How else? Like when you do have a sense of failure or a sense of shame, there are all sorts of mantras. One of the most helpful mantras for me is just, now I know what that's like. Or another one that's really helpful is, apparently I was playing something out. Your friend who suddenly gets a new Range Rover, they get a bigger wedding ring, they go to Hawaii, and now they have a second home in Big Bear, and you're like, who died? And you were in the will. Like that's like new money starter kit. You know what I mean? Yeah. You didn't have lots of money before. You wanted to know what it was like to eat at that restaurant. You wanted to know what it was like to vacation there. You wanted to know what it's like to drive your dream car. Yeah, great. You're playing something out. That's fine. It's new money starter kit. Like in lots and lots of things in life.
Yeah.
If you grew up in chaos, you want like an ordered home. If you grew up where no one had any education and you're on your second PhD, probably you were like, I am going to be an educated person. So these things that we do, oftentimes we're playing something out. And that's how often you have an end to a chapter is, going back to your question like 9 questions ago, the chapter ends because that story worked until it didn't. It makes perfect sense why you went on that path. And part of the feeling of, oh, something's really not working and it used to, is you probably had a question and then you got an answer. What's it like to be somebody who has power, money, connections, a voice? Oh, now I know. I always wanted to know what that was like. What is it like for those people? Now you're one of those people. Now, what's it like to live in a big, beautiful house and have someone clean it and have a pool person and have a yard? Now it's nice and it's a lot of bills. Yeah, there's a reason why you want to downsize. You learned what it's like to have lots of stuff. So if people, like, if you take the judgment and shame and all that like dense storytelling and just go, I'm a human being. I'm on this ball hurtling through space at 500,000 miles an hour. Like what, 67,000 miles an hour, the Earth is traveling in a galaxy that's going, this is an absurd thing to be a human. So you trying to be you and trying to learn how to do this, the only way to get to the serious stuff is to lighten it up. It's the only way.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? When I first started this thing, I really lightened it up on social media. And the attack, oh God, it was a total humbling experience because I only had one perspective of infidelity at that point in time, and it was my own. And so I couldn't really develop a full perspective of infidelity because the only stories I had ever heard were my own. And so then once I started to open up this, tell me your story, I'll read it for you on TikTok, basically like shame dies when stories are told in safe spaces, basically. And I was like, oh, I could create an entire space where I allow shame to die and I allow a marginalized portion of society to come and be supported by people who want to support them. And it's been this huge experience for me. Like whenever I first started, I'll tell you this, give you a little insight on me, because I doubt you even looked me up or anything.
It's always much more enjoyable to me to not know anything.
I know, me too. I always say, whenever people meet me, they're like, so I'm sure so-and-so shared your story. And I'm like, I think it's way more interesting to hear your story from you. So let's start there, rather than it being a secondhand opinion or somebody else's interpretation of it, which all comes back around to my fascination with the truth. And it always seems to be a firsthand account. Like nobody can tell your story better than you. Anyways, but I wanted to say that since I clung to my religious roots so deeply that when the affair happened, I refused to look at content that was spirituality, anything that was outside of the Christian dogma. And then I had one thought, and it was like, well, why would God create so many people who wrote books if there was only one important book? And then it like opened up the floodgates to me reading. And so I started reading a bunch right after the affair, and I started to collect all of these different perspectives. And I want to hear your thoughts on being alone with your perspective. And when your perspective feels like shit, what should you do next? And how do you do it in a way where you're still making sure that you're the one who's making decisions?
Depending on what you're experiencing, I would just ask, what's the playing field here? Is it shame? Okay. I'm sure lots of people have had things to say about shame. So I am going to educate myself on this playing field. How have human beings dealt with shame? And then I'm going to integrate. So I'm going to take all of this and that's interesting perspective. Oh, Gabor Mate, interesting. So, okay. I would just say as a friend of mine says, why wouldn't you want to hear the greatest hits? Let's say there are songs that human beings have written for thousands of years. Wouldn't you want to hear the ones that the most amount of people said were the greatest songs? So I just go, what are the greatest hits on shame? I'm sure somewhere you could go, what are the 5 best books on shame? What are the 11 voices? I'm sure now with the internet, that's all out there. And I would say, I'm just bringing myself up to speed. And what I'm integrating, meaning, which is what we're always doing, I'm going to take what's helpful and I'm going to leave the rest behind. That's what a mature adult does, is you duct tape together what's helpful. And if you begin to see certain themes, okay, noted. This person mentioned that, this person mentioned that, this person mentioned that. Oh, okay. And you're always like, and obviously there's sometimes a fascination with somebody strikes a chord. Here's what's interesting about a quote. Like you said, shame dies in safe places. When somebody comes across a quote that blows them, oh my God, this quote, it blows me away. I've never thought about this. What's interesting is any voice that does really help, the only reason it strikes a chord is it speaks to something within you that you already know, you just didn't have words for it. So that fresh insight, wow, that changes the game. That's so helpful. It's helpful because it speaks, it's like hits the same note as something happening in your heart. So it's actually not that unfamiliar.
It's the intelligent reminder.
I would always just ask the person, what have people said about? What is the collective wisdom on whatever it is? And then if you read something and it doesn't help, it's just not a big deal. From what you do, like I would never like pitch or promote or try to convince somebody about what I do. People find you, and if it's helpful, it resonates. And if it doesn't, it's just not a big deal. This idea of that person, then it's not for you. Relax.
Yeah, totally. I do hope that kind of dissipates over time, but I won't bore our listeners or you with that part of my life. I have one last question for you because I want to.
It seems like there are people who could use, it would be very helpful for them for you to walk with them in your voice. Is that true? Okay. So why
Yes.
would you have energy for any other voice? Seems like your day would be filled with people who were curious and open and wanted to walk with you. How would you even know
Why would
that there
energy
was
for
some
the
other
people
kind of
who don't want to walk with me?
person out there?
They make their voice known to me. And then I look at it.
Good.
Like recently, I had to shut down the comment section.
So for you,
really
it's something about building a wall so that doesn't get to you. And then there's a door in the wall with a handle on your side.
Yeah.
So it's the comment section. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that?
Comment section. So I shut it down.
It sounds like, from what I'm picking up from the questions you're asking, you're interested in your work is about significant engagement around the human journey, love, grace, character, forgiveness, integrity, healing. So it sounds like the only kind of person who will understand what you're doing is somebody who's up for that kind of path.
Yes.
A free, zero requirement internet public food fight in the comment section where somebody can throw stones at you would be the last place. It's the opposite of what you're doing. We're like underground. Like, what if people, pardon?
I pretty much am.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I pretty much am.
That makes sense to me that you would get into this and fly your flag and, hey, everybody, I'm here. You're actually following a really interesting pattern of, it's almost like the wise woman in the cave who you have to know where her cave is. And the people who find it arrive, okay, I'm ready. Let's do the open heart surgery.
Yeah.
Because your thing in the public space, you're a screen and everybody just shows their movie. They're a projector and they just show their movie on you. They don't even ask who you are.
Because even whenever it first started, some of the thoughts that I had that I didn't share with many people because I thought that they were weird or way too intimate were thoughts like, I grew up in the home affected by infidelity. And I was like, man, if these two people would have just let each other go sooner, or even had the willingness to let each other go, like there could have been a lot of traumatic responses that could have been avoided. Like there were cops involved and stuff like that. And so I was thinking, like, by building a comment section, I was actually building a venting space. And for the first 2 years when I didn't have a lot of support in the comment section, it was easy because I was the only one being attacked. And I had already thought those thoughts that they were shouting at me in the comment section. So it didn't bother me. But what bothered me was when there was somebody who was in a more vulnerable position than me, who did not sign up for it. For her to get caught in the crossfire was something where I was like, whoa, this is out of control. And so then I turned off comment sections. And of course, they're really bothered by that. These are just really botherable people.
Yeah, so they
I'm
don't
finding
get,
like anything I
they
do
just don't
bothers them.
Get to
they
be in
monitor.
your space. They just aren't adult enough.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're talking about is like mother bear energy. That's like silverback gorilla energy. I create a space where people can vent and we say, now we're venting, where people can share. Now we're sharing. And it sounds like one of the jobs of the space making that you're doing is to protect people from those other voices. Yeah.
It does feel like that. But then at the same time, I got this question asked of me recently from a girl I really respect. And she was like, is it really yours to hold? Is it protecting the individuals who are engaging this community? Is it really yours to hold? And at one point we had a disgruntled person go in to our private community and start to dox individuals inside the private
bonkers
community.
World.
Yeah, what? I do. And then one of the girls, after I changed everybody's names inside the private community to an alias so they could no longer determine who they were in the real world. And I was like, remove all personal information from the private community. One of my early adopters, Grace, it's not her real name, but Grace had approached me and she was like, I really had to back off the community. That was one of my favorite places to be. But when you had wiped the community of previous posts, it felt like somebody told me I was no longer safe to exist in the world. And it was the same person who told me I was safe to exist in the world. And so there was this moment where I had to think really hard, who am I really protecting here? Who am I capable of protecting? And is that mine to hold? And eventually I came to the conclusion that I need to put all of the posts back and I need to allow people to decide what they're going to do in their own lives. But yeah, it's been this really weird, I've never encountered hate like this. It is collective. And I've even asked a couple of people, what is the entity at play here that is really not in favor of this entity existing? And they told me it was righteous indignation, likely religious stuff, and also just like deep hurt. And they project it onto this entity. A lot of people think that I'm helping people cheat. And I'm like, I can't explain it to you if that is the assumption you're making.
Yeah, so for you, the freedom...
That's how I feel.
If literally that's somebody's so lacking in curiosity or getting what you're doing, that's not somebody who can engage. They don't get to be in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. And the only way that I prevent them from engaging is by not engaging.
Yeah. How else would Chelsea learn to do this than to do it?
Back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, tell me about it. I actually wonder so much about your personal life now that I've watched The Heretic. I wonder about your personal journey and like
I wasn't on the internet. So when people would say people are all your critics, I would say who? I wouldn't know. Unless somebody would say so-and-so said this about you.
That's basically, so whenever this one creator had been doing stuff, I told my team, I said, I do not want to see a single message inside of our stuff about this other creator.
So I wasn't ever, like I wasn't on the internet looking, I haven't ever been on Facebook looking at comments. It just wasn't a part of my life. I had really interesting work I was doing, and there were people around me who were like really compelled, and like we were exploring it together, and they were like, I love what's happening here. Keep going.
Who was that one woman in The Heretic that did your introduction? And she was like, the first things that come to my mind when I think of Rob are just absolute sincere joy. I don't know.
I didn't make that movie. I didn't see that movie until I went to the theater and sat in the theater. Somebody asked if they could follow me around.
Good.
So I said yes, but the only way it will be interesting is if I have no say. And they were like, you'll have no say, you'll have no edit, you'll have no creative control. And that was the only way it seemed interesting to me, is just to let them access. And then I would just go to the theater and see it. So I went with my family. We red carpet, and then we sat in the third row as a family and just watched at the premiere. I've only seen it once, and it was in this very surreal setting, as you can imagine.
I bet. And I love that you lead yourself with the, how can I make that?
So to answer your question, I just only found it was always just, there was like joy. It was like making things and sharing them, and then somebody resonating with it was always just like really compelling. So the idea that somebody somewhere didn't like it was just irrelevant. Like, I don't know why I would spend energy dealing with that. Why wouldn't I just do more? Why wouldn't I just do more? Why wouldn't I? People being mean or nasty and all the things, I would only ever hear it second or third hand. And even the people around me would be like, why would I tell him that? Why? Why would he know that? That's dumb. Who cares? Literally, who cares?
Yeah. I need to get back to that place. I feel like I was really at that place before this whole thing launched. And then it became like this fucking shit show that, oh, we need to be worried about marketing. Oh, we need to be worried about reputation. Oh, look at all this press that you're getting, but it's all negative. And I was just like, I can't control any of that though. I can't. I can influence it. I can re-articulate. I can do all of these things, but
no, you have the stuff that you
enjoyable for me.
Yeah, you have the stuff that you enjoy doing, so you just do that. The other stuff, what? Ugh. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. How else would Chelsea learn how to be a Chelsea? Just trying it.
I don't know. I learned by doing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I learned by doing.
I say that often. I often am like, that's one of my main mantras. We just did a work ago and I was like, everything related to fear, just say to yourself, I learn by doing. This is not a conceptual, theoretical idea to me. This is flesh and blood life. So this is how I learn. I learn by doing. So if I lose money or I say something or I do something that how else would I learn? Are you familiar with the myth of transgression?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, this is a really ancient idea.
No, tell me.
How would you ever be able to experience grace if you didn't make a mess of it? So you can say, don't make a mess of it, don't make a mess of it. But the making a mess of it is the gift. And the person who's really in trouble is the person who hasn't ever made any messes. There's a whole world of experience they haven't had. And actually, the person who understands this, and there's like, well, that's just licensed to do whatever you want. No, actually, the people who understand this tend to make better and better decisions that hurt less and less people. They tend to be people who have more character and more integrity because they realize, how else would you know any of this unless you really screw up? You know what I mean? Like I've never met somebody who did something they really truly regretted or made a mess, and they were working through it and they were seeing that they're okay and they were experiencing grace, who didn't go forward with more integrity, more character, more love. Yeah. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I really appreciate this.
Pleasure to meet you.
It was a pleasure to meet you, and I can't wait to see you in Ojai.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, you're likely someone who is invested in the journey of being the other woman. We understand that this can be a difficult and complex experience, which is why we offer guided coaching to help you heal and move forward. We encourage you to explore the links in the episode description or visit theotherwomanandthewife.com/coaching to learn more about our exclusive coaching program and apply today. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.